Sam had always thought his wedding day would feel like a dream. In a way, it did. New York was alive that morning, the city buzzing with cars and voices, but inside the hotel where the ceremony was being prepared, everything felt slower, quieter. The chandeliers glowed, flowers filled the room with their sweet scent, and the sound of a piano drifted softly in the background. Sam stood in front of a mirror, fixing his tie for what felt like the 100th time. His hands were shaking a little, and he muttered to himself, almost laughing. "Relax, Sam, it's just a wedding. It's just forever." He smiled nervously at his reflection, but the feeling in his chest wouldn't calm down. The door opened and Emma stepped inside. For a second, Sam forgot how to breathe. She wasn't even in her wedding dress yet, just a simple silk gown, but she looked perfect. She gave him that smile he loved, the one that always made the rest of the world disappear. "You're talking to yourself again," she said playfully. "That's a bad sign before the vows." Sam chuckled, embarrassed, and reached out to hold her hand. "Can you blame me? Sometimes you feel too unreal. Like I've seen you before, somewhere else in another life." Emma tilted her head and looked at him curiously. "Maybe you're just dreaming," she whispered. "But if you are, don't wake up." Before Sam could reply, someone called Emma from the hall. She squeezed his hand and slipped out, leaving him alone with his thoughts. Sam stared at the door, repeating her words in his head, feeling something strange stir inside him. The ballroom was filling with people now. Guests arrived in suits and dresses, chatting, laughing, clinking glasses. Sam moved through the room, smiling, shaking hands, listening to congratulations. He laughed when he was supposed to, posed for photos, but all the while he kept glancing at Emma across the room. She was glowing, talking with friends, her laughter rising above the noise. Every time he looked at her, he felt both grateful and uneasy, as if he was afraid she might disappear if he blinked. Sam lifted a glass of champagne, trying to calm his nerves. He was happy, of course he was, but something inside him felt unsettled, as if there was more to this day than just a wedding. He pushed the thought aside. Today was about Emma, about love, about beginning a new life together. That was all that mattered. Then it happened. As Sam turned to greet a waiter, his head rose just a little too high. The sharp edge of the chandelier met his skull with a heavy crack. Pain exploded in his head. The glass in his hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Gasps filled the room as Sam staggered, his vision blurring, the sound of voices fading into a dull echo. He felt his knees buckle, the floor rushing up toward him, and then everything went black. Sam's eyes opened slowly. The first thing he felt was heat, heavy and dry against his skin. He blinked, expecting to see the golden lights of the hotel ceiling. Instead, there was nothing but sky. A blinding blue sky with the sun burning directly into his face. He sat up quickly, sand spilling off his clothes. His tuxedo was gone. In its place, rough robes hung over his shoulders, and leather straps held simple sandals to his feet. His hands shook as he looked around. The sound of New York cars, voices, music was gone. All he could hear was the endless whistle of the wind over the dunes. "What is this?" Sam whispered. His throat was dry, his voice weak. He turned in every direction, but the desert stretched forever, golden waves under the sun. He staggered to his feet, almost falling, and called out, louder this time. "Emma! Where are you?" His voice echoed, then faded into silence. Panic clawed at him. This had to be a dream. He touched his forehead where the chandelier had hit him, expecting blood, but found only sweat. Then he saw them. Figures in the distance, moving slowly across the sand. Camels, men in long robes. A caravan making its way through the desert. Sam's heart jumped. He waved his arms, stumbling toward them. "Help! Please wait!" The caravan slowed. The men looked at him with suspicion. They spoke in Arabic, their words sharp and unfamiliar. Sam froze. He couldn't understand them. His chest tightened with fear. One of the men dismounted. He was young, with intense eyes that seemed to burn even in the desert sun. He looked at Sam carefully, as though trying to solve a puzzle. He said something, And the other men laughed quietly, shaking their heads. Sam stepped back, confused. I don't understand. Where am I? What year is this? His voice cracked with desperation.
The men frowned. They whispered to each other.
The young one pointed at him and said a name. At first Sam thought he had misheard. But then it came again. Clearer. Stronger. Kays. Sam felt a shock run through his body. His head spun. He looked down at his hands, then at his reflection in a small pool of water near the caravan. He froze. The face staring back at him wasn't his own. Darker eyes, sharper features, a beard forming along the jaw. It wasn't Sam anymore. It was someone else. Sam stumbled back, gasping. No, this isn't real.
This can't be real. The men were still watching him, but he barely noticed them now.
The name echoed in his head. Kays. He remembered the stories. An old tale. A legend of forbidden love. Kays and Layla. A love that burned so fiercely it destroyed them both. His hands trembled. Somehow, impossibly, he was inside that story. He wasn't Sam in New York anymore. He had become Kays. He turned, looking at the desert, the caravan, the strange men who now treated him as one of their own. Fear and disbelief swirled inside him, but underneath it, something else began to stir. A feeling faint but undeniable. A presence pulling at him, drawing him forward. Somewhere in this place he knew. Emma was here. Not Emma as he knew her, but someone else. Another name, another life, but still her, always her. And as the men called again, beckoning him toward the caravan, Sam now Kays took his first unsteady step into the life that wasn't his, but had already begun. The men of the caravan treated him strangely at first. They thought he had gone mad, speaking with odd words, asking strange questions. But soon they called him by one name only, Kays. Sam resisted inside, but the more time passed, the more he felt the weight of that name pressing down on him. It was as if the desert itself was rewriting him. Days passed. He walked among them, ate their food, listened to their songs by the fire. Their words became clearer, as though his mind was slowly remembering instead of learning. And one evening, when the caravan stopped near an oasis, he saw her. She stood apart from the others, carrying a jar of water, her face half hidden by a veil. But her eyes, Sam's breath caught in his chest. They were the same eyes he had always known. Emma. Yet here, her name was Layla. She glanced at him only once, but it was enough. Something inside him shifted, a recognition deeper than memory. He tried to speak to her, but she lowered her gaze and walked away. That night, Sam lay awake under the stars, his heart pounding.
He remembered the old legend, Kays, the poet, and Layla, the forbidden love.
He now understood where he was, and what it meant. He was trapped in the story, forced to live it. And he already knew how it ended. But when morning came and he saw Layla again, none of that mattered. He found reasons to walk near her, to speak even just a few words. At first she answered with shyness, but slowly her eyes softened. Her voice grew warmer. When they spoke, the world fell away, just like it always had when it was Emma. They met in secret, under the cover of night. Kays Sam recited verses to her, words of longing that seemed to flow from somewhere deeper than his own soul. She listened, her eyes bright with tears, her hands trembling as she reached for his. For a moment it felt as if love could conquer anything. But whispers spread quickly in the desert. Families heard of their meetings, and anger grew. Layla's relatives forbade her to see him again. The more they tried to separate them, the more desperate Sam became. He fought against it, but the story was stronger than his will. One night, when Layla's family caught them together, chaos erupted. Swords were drawn, shouts filled the air. Sam fought with all his strength, but the world felt like it was collapsing around him. Layla was pulled away, her cries tearing through the night. He was left beaten, broken, his body trembling with both rage and sorrow. From then on, they kept him away from her. He became a shadow, wandering alone, writing his pain in the sand, whispering her name to the stars. Layla, Emma. His heart was split between two worlds.
but the feeling was the same. Love, impossible yet eternal. Then came the battle.
A clash between tribes broke out, and Kaze was caught in it. Sam felt the weight of a sword in his hand, the chaos of men shouting, the clash of steel against steel.
He fought with fury, but deep inside he knew this was not about victory.
It was about fate. An enemy blade struck him. Pain shot through his body, but he kept fighting until another blow forced him to his knees. The battlefield roared around him, but all he could see was her face, Layla's Emma's, shining in his mind. He fell to the ground, his breath growing shallow. His blood soaked into the sand. The sounds of battle faded, replaced by silence. As his eyes closed, a strange calm washed over him. He realized the truth. This death was not the end. It was the passage. The price he had to pay to move forward. Somewhere, in another time, another place, she would be waiting again. His final whisper was her name. Emma. The desert faded. The pain dissolved. Darkness returned. But beneath it, a light flickered, another world calling him. Another story waiting to begin. Last time on Time Travel. Sam was about to marry Emma in New York. The celebration was perfect. The future looked bright. Until a strange accident changed everything. A blow to the head under the chandelier sent Sam spinning out of his world. When he opened his eyes, the city was gone, the wedding vanished. He found himself in the Arabian desert, dressed as another man, surrounded by strangers. A name echoed in his mind, Kaze. The legend had begun.
They say death is the end, but for Sam, it never is.
When the blade pierced his chest in the desert, when the sand turned red beneath him, he thought it was over. But once again, darkness was not final. Once again, another world was waiting. This time, he awoke to the sound of waves. The scent of salt filled his lungs. Sam gasped and sat up, his body heavy, the ground beneath him marble, not sand. He looked around and his heart raced. Towering columns surrounded him, carved with images of gods and kings. Beyond them stretched the sea, endless and glittering beneath the sun. Ships with painted sails floated in the harbor. Soldiers marched with spears. Servants hurried with baskets of fruit. Sam stumbled to his feet. But he wasn't Sam anymore. His reflection in the polished bronze shield of a passing soldier told him the truth. A hardened face, strong jaw, hair cut in the style of Rome. A breastplate of steel, a red cloak trailing behind him. He was Mark Antony, Roman general. Panic struck him. He spun in circles, whispering, "Emma, Emma, where are you?" His voice broke against the stone. No answer came. People walked past, bowing their heads to him as if he were a man of power, yet inside he was lost, alone. He wandered through the palace, his footsteps echoing down corridors lit with torches. Every servant he stopped only bowed, waiting for orders, not understanding the desperation in his eyes. "The Queen," he muttered. "Where is the Queen?" He didn't even know if she would be here, but his soul knew. She was always here. Somewhere. In every age. In every story. At last, he reached a great hall. Its floor polished like glass, its walls painted with gold and lapis. Musicians plucked strings, and the air smelled of wine and incense. At the far end, hidden in shadows, voices murmured. Sam's heart pounded. Slowly, the crowd parted. And then he saw her. Emma, but not Emma. Draped in silk, crowned with jewels, eyes dark and endless. Cleopatra. The sight of her crushed the air from his chest. She stood with the grace of a queen, yet when her eyes lifted to meet his, time itself stopped. She looked at him with curiosity, suspicion, and something else. Something eternal. Sam's lips trembled. "Emma," he whispered under his breath, but the name was swallowed by the sound of music. He took a step closer, his hands shaking. Cleopatra tilted her head, studying him. "Marcus Antonius," she said in a voice smooth as honey, yet sharp as a blade. "You seek me as though you have been lost." Sam froze. His throat tightened. Lost, that was exactly what he was. Across deserts, across centuries, across lives, always searching. And now, here she was again. He wanted to run to her, to take her hand, to shout her true name, but the weight of history pressed on him. He could only bow, hiding the storm in his heart. Cleopatra, he said, forcing the Roman name through his lips. I have found you. The first days were filled with silence. Cleopatra watched him carefully, as if weighing the soul behind the Roman armor. Sam followed her through the palace, through halls of marble and gardens of jasmine. He played the role expected of Mark Antony, but inside he was still searching. Searching for Emma in the queen's face. And every time she looked at him, he felt it, she was there. Different name, different crown, but the same soul. She tested him with questions, sharp and dangerous. Why do you look at me as though you have known me before? Why does a Roman general tremble when I speak? Sam wanted to tell her everything, that he had loved her across centuries, that every life brought him back to her, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he answered with honesty hidden in poetry. Because some faces, he said, are carved into eternity. And yours is one of them. Her lips curved into a smile that was not just amused, but intrigued. For the first time she let him sit close beside her. And soon they were inseparable. Nights in Alexandria were unlike any Sam had known. The city glittered with torches, music spilling from courtyards, dancers moving like flames. Cleopatra and Antony threw feasts that shook the empire tables heavy with food, fountains spilling with wine, poets reciting verses of desire. And at the center of it all sat Sam and Emma, reborn as Antony and Cleopatra, their hands never far from each other's, their eyes never leaving. The people whispered, Rome trembled, but they did not care. Love burned too brightly. On the Nile, they sailed together in golden ships, their sails painted with purple and silver. Sam stood at her side as the river stretched like a mirror beneath the moon. Emma leaned into him, her voice soft. Do you ever fear the future? Sam closed his eyes. He wanted to say yes. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he knew how their story ended, that fate had always been cruel. But instead he pressed her hand. Not tonight. Not with you. She smiled, but there was sadness in her gaze, as though some part of her already knew too. But the future could not be ignored forever. Messengers arrived from Rome, their words heavy with threat. Octavian, the rising power, called Antony a traitor, a man bewitched by the Queen of Egypt. Soldiers whispered of war. The senators demanded Antony return. Cleopatra listened to the reports with cold eyes, but Sam saw the fear behind them. They will come for us, she said one night, her voice breaking. Rome will never allow this love. Sam's chest tightened. He held her face in his hands. Then let them come, he whispered. I have crossed death itself to find you. I will not lose you to politics. But in his heart, he felt the pull of destiny again. No matter how tightly he held her, history was a chain too heavy to break. And yet, even as war loomed, their love grew fiercer. Perhaps because they knew the end was near. Every embrace, every kiss, every moment by torchlight was lived as though it were the last. They loved as if love alone could fight back an empire. But empires are not so easily defeated. The drums of war shook the earth. The harbor of Actium was a storm of sails and steel. Octavian's fleet stretched across the horizon, a wall of death closing in. Sam stood at the bow of his ship, armor heavy on his shoulders, sword tight in his grip. The wind stung his face, but all he could think of was Emma Cleopatra. She stood on her own vessel, her eyes locked on his. Even across the chaos, he felt her gaze. She was afraid, but she was still his anchor. The battle began with fire. Arrows streaked across the sky, ships collided, men screamed as iron clashed on iron. The sea turned red. Sam fought like a man possessed, driving his blade into any who stood in his way. He no longer cared for Rome or Egypt. He fought only for her. But fate was not merciful. Octavian's fleet pressed harder, his men overwhelming. One by one, Antony's ships were crushed or burned. Sam felt the tide turning. His soldiers fell around him, their cries piercing the roar of battle. He staggered, blood running down his arm, his breath heavy. Through the smoke, he saw Emma's ship retreating.
Not by cowardice, but by necessity, her guards pulling her away, shouting that the queen must live. Sam's heart broke.
He shouted her name across the water, though no one else could hear it.
Emma!
A spear struck his side, and the force drove him to his knees. Pain exploded, but he refused to fall. He pulled the weapon free and kept fighting, his strength fading but his will unbroken. At last he was struck down. His sword slipped from his hand, his body collapsing onto the deck. The world spun, the sky above him a blur of fire and smoke. They carried him to Cleopatra's quarters, broken and bleeding. When she saw him, she ran to his side, falling to her knees. Her hands cupped his face, trembling.
"No,"
she whispered, her voice breaking. "Not you." "Not now."
Sam's breath came shallow, each word a struggle. "I found you."
"Even here, even in this life, I'll always find you." Tears streamed down her cheeks, falling onto his armor. "Don't leave me, Marcus. Please, stay." He smiled faintly, his eyes dimming but still fixed on hers. "I'll see you again, in another time. In another life." And then his chest rose one last time. And fell. Silence. Cleopatra clutched him, pressing her forehead to his, sobbing into the stillness. The Queen of Egypt, the most powerful woman in the world, wept like a broken lover. She kissed his lips, already growing cold, and whispered, "Come back to me, wherever you are." Outside, the empire roared in victory. Inside, the world ended for her. And somewhere beyond death, Sam was already being pulled away, his soul torn from Rome and Egypt, searching for Emma once more. Sam woke to a name that wasn't his, Kale. The sound pressed into his ears like it belonged to him. He opened his eyes and saw a roof made of palm leaves, smoke rising from a low fire, and a man with a painted face standing over him. The man told him his father Tupa was waiting.
Sam pushed himself up and only then realized his hands were not his hands.
Stronger, scarred, wrapped in bone bracelets. He was not in New York, not in Rome, not in the desert. He was inside the body of someone else. The name Kale echoed in his head, and memories that were not his own flickered for a second. A stern father with a jaguar tooth necklace, a boy standing in front of him trying not to tremble. He walked outside, and the village came alive around him, the Irani, a people of red paint and long bows. Children running, women grinding seeds, warriors tightening bowstrings. The drums were beating heavy and slow. Everyone looked at him with expectation. He followed the sound until he saw Tupa, the chief, his father in this body, speaking with elders. He turned, his scar running down his throat, his gaze awake. He told Kale that today blood would end,
that the Meru across the river had agreed to peace, that Arun, their chief, would give his daughter in marriage,
and that Kale would take her and bind two tribes. Sam's chest tightened. Nahiara. The name sounded heavy and wrong. He thought of Emma.
Tupa's voice pressed him to answer, and Sam said yes, because the body knew no other choice.
The preparations filled the village, food wrapped in leaves, feather crowns dried in the sun, children running with painted faces. A boy called Lyko smiled at him and asked if she would be beautiful, if the Meru really sang to the river. Sam forced a smile and walked away, pressed his forehead to a tree and whispered Emma's name. But the forest gave him only birds and insects. At midday, canoes slid across the river, Irani on one side, Meru on the other. They came together in a clearing. Two tribes mirroring each other, painted differently but with the same sharp eyes. Tupa and Aruan exchanged words of pride and threat, and then the name was called Nahiara.
She stepped forward, tall, proud, her hair braided with shells, her eyes dark and calm, her arms painted in white and red. She was strong, she was steady. She was not Emma. Sam froze. The world bent around him. She held out her hand. He could not move. A murmur swept through the circle. The chief stiffened. The drums stopped. Tupa's voice cut sharp, telling him not to shame them. Sam swallowed, whispered that he could not. The silence that followed was louder than the drums had ever been. Aroan's eyes hardened. Tupa's anger burned. Nahiara dropped her hand and stood straighter, her voice calm as she said if peace needed a man who did not want it, then perhaps the spirits were wiser. Sam's chest burned. He stepped back. Tupa warned him again, told him to stay. Sam said the truth that escaped his lips before he could stop it. I am not your son. That made the circle tremble. Warriors of the Maru blocked the way back to the river. Arani raised bows. The air broke into threats and shouts. Through all of it, Nahiara's voice reached him, telling him to go if he could not carry it. Sam ran. He slipped past spears and arrows, into the trees, the jungle closing on him like a mouth. Both tribes shouted behind him. Arani for shame, Maru for insult, arrows whistling, spears clattering on rock. He stumbled through vines, crashed down a slope, scrambled up again, blood warm at his side where a point had grazed him. He pushed through until the voices faded, until only the forest and his heartbeat roared. His legs gave out. He fell into leaves, pressed his hand to his ribs, and laughed once when he felt the blood. Of course. He rolled onto his back, the canopy swaying above him, and whispered Emma's name, begging the silence. The sky turned gray, the forest breathed around him, and he let the dark close in. When footsteps came later, soft, cautious, when hands touched his forehead and a voice he didn't know whispered, he couldn't move. A drink was poured past his lips, bitter, strange. Then firelight touched his skin and he forced his eyes open. A face leaned above him, braided hair with shells, clay paint on her skin, eyes he knew before he could think. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. She touched his hand and told him to rest, that he was safe. The last thing he heard was another voice calling her name, Amaru. And Sam, trapped in Kale's body, let the dark take him again, clinging to the sound that echoed across centuries. Sam drifted in and out of darkness, caught between the body of Kale and the mind that was still his. He felt hands on his wounds, herbs pressed into his skin, bitter drinks poured past his lips. Sometimes he thought he heard drums, sometimes only the whisper of water, sometimes a woman's voice humming softly. When he woke fully, it was night, a small fire burning beside him, and she was there. Amaru. She sat close, her hair braided with shells, her skin painted with clay marks that glowed faintly in the firelight, her eyes steady and watching him as though she had been waiting for days. He tried to speak, but his lips cracked and his voice broke. She held a gourd to his mouth and he drank, the water cold and sweet. Rest, she said softly, though he did not understand her words, only the intent. He closed his eyes again. The next morning he woke to the sound of birds screaming in the canopy. His body ached, but the pain was duller now. He was lying on woven mats inside a hut built of palm leaves and branches, smoke curling through a hole in the roof. Amaru entered carrying a basket of roots and leaves. She knelt by his side, checked his bandages, and worked silently, her hands quick and sure. He watched her, the way her brow furrowed as she tied the cloth, the way she hummed under her breath, and he felt the same pull he had felt across deserts and palaces. He knew without knowing why. She was Emma. Not Emma as he remembered, but Emma as the world reshaped her, the soul he had chased across centuries. When she noticed his eyes on her, she smiled faintly, and, for the first time since he had woken in Kale's body, he felt calm. She said something in her language, a string of soft syllables that washed over him like water. He didn't understand, but he nodded. She laughed, a quiet laugh, and it broke through the heaviness of the jungle. Days passed. She brought him food wrapped in leaves, fruits cut into halves, water from the river.
She showed him how to chew certain plants to dull the pain, how to crush roots into a paste for fever. He healed slowly, strength returning with each sunrise. At night they sat by the fire, the forest alive around them, eyes meeting in silence that spoke more than words. Sam wanted to tell her everything about New York, about Kays and Layla, about Rome, but the words died in his throat. She would not have understood, and maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was the way she looked at him, as if she had always known him. On the second night, a storm rolled through the forest. Rain hammered the roof of the hut. Thunder shook the ground. Lightning painted the trees white. Sam could not sleep, his body restless. He stepped outside and saw Amaru standing barefoot in the rain, her face tilted to the sky. She raised her arms as if speaking to the storm. He moved to her, his hand brushing her shoulder, and she turned to him, water running down her cheeks like tears. In her eyes he saw recognition, even if she could not name it. She reached for his hand and held it tight, and for that moment he believed that maybe the curse of time had ended. On the third day he walked without pain. The wound in his side was still tender but healing. Amaru walked with him through the forest, showing him hidden trails, rivers where dolphins surfaced, trees where parrots nested. They laughed when he tried to copy her words and failed, his tongue clumsy with sounds. She touched his arm gently, guiding him, and for those 3 days he felt peace. He thought of Tupa, of Aruan, of Nahara, of the war between Irani and Maru, but it all seemed distant, like smoke carried away by wind. Here, with Amaru, there was no war, no duty, no borrowed body. Only her. That night, lying by the fire, he whispered her name. Amaru. She turned to him, smiled, and whispered back a word he did not know, but he heard Emma in it, and his chest tightened. He closed his eyes with her beside him, and for the first time since the beginning of his journey through time, he let himself believe he had arrived where he was meant to stay. The forest felt different on the fourth morning, quieter, as if holding its breath. Sam woke with Amaru beside him, her head resting lightly on his shoulder. The fire burned low, and for a moment he thought the world had given them mercy. He rose, fetched water from the river, and watched her kneel in the sand, her hands gathering herbs, her hair catching the light. He thought, this is it. This is the life I want. Not palaces, not wars, not borrowed destinies. Just her. They spent the day together as they had before, walking hidden trails, eating fruit beneath wide trees, laughing when parrots scattered overhead. Sam's body felt stronger, healed, and his heart lighter. At night, lying under the stars, he touched her face and whispered, I found you. She didn't understand the words, but she closed her eyes and leaned into his touch as if she did. For those 3 days he had been free, and he began to believe it could last. But the jungle remembers. The next evening, as they returned to the hut, the sound of a broken branch snapped behind them. Sam froze. Amaru's eyes widened. From the shadows stepped a man, tall and painted in Irani colors, a spear in his hand. His face one Sam knew through Kale's memories. Arui, Kale's childhood companion, fierce and loyal to Tupa. His eyes burned with betrayal. You shamed the Irani, Ari said, voice low, steady. You left your people. You left your duty. You left Nahiara. Sam stepped forward, instinctive, trying to speak, but the words were useless, not his language. He raised his hands. I can't. I couldn't, he tried, but Ari only saw Kale, the warrior who had fled. The spear flashed. Sam dodged, the point slicing his arm. He stumbled, grabbed a branch, swung clumsily, but Ari was trained. Faster, stronger. They circled, the firelight flickering between them, Amaru crying out in fear. Sam fought, desperate, every move powered not by skill, but by the need to protect her. He blocked, lunged, fell, rose again. The jungle echoed with their struggle, birds exploding from trees, the river churning nearby. Then the strike came. A sharp pain in his side. Deep, final. He gasped, the world tilting. Arui pulled back, leaving him staggering. Sam fell to his knees, hands pressing the wound, blood warm between his fingers. Aria's voice carried no triumph, only judgment. The spirits do not forgive weakness. He vanished into the trees, leaving Sam to the earth. Amaru rushed to him, catching him before he collapsed. She pressed her hands against his wound, tears streaking down her painted cheeks. She called his name Kale, again and again, but he shook his head, eyes fixed on her. With what breath he had left, he whispered, "Emma." She froze, the name striking something inside her she could not explain. Her lips trembled, her eyes filled with recognition she didn't understand. She cradled him, rocking gently, whispering words he couldn't hear. Sam smiled faintly, blood on his lips, his vision blurring. "I found you," he whispered again, his voice breaking. She held him tighter, her tears falling on his face, her cries lost to the roar of the jungle. His chest rose once more, then stilled. And in that silence the air shimmered. Light gathered around his body, golden and strange, the sign he knew too well. Amaru gasped, holding him tighter as if she could keep him, but the light swallowed him, and in her arms he was gone. She screamed his name, her voice torn and raw, but the forest only echoed her grief. Sam was gone. Another death, another time broken open. The jungle closed in again, leaving Amaru alone, clutching only emptiness. And somewhere far away in another age, he opened his eyes once more. In every age, in every world, Sam awakens in a body not his own. Each time he finds her Emma reborn with a different face, a different name, yet always the same soul. And each time destiny tears them apart. Now the journey has carried him to the land of the rising sun, where honor is law and love is forbidden. The first thing Sam felt was the weight of steel at his side. A sword, long and curved, resting against his hip. His hands, rougher now, gripped the lacquered scabbard, and when he looked down he saw the armor of a samurai glinting faintly in the morning light. The air smelled of pine and smoke, and the sound of a temple bell echoed somewhere far away. He was not Sam from New York, nor Kale from the Amazon, nor a soldier from Rome. He was someone else again. Men stood around him in rows, armored, disciplined, banners of their clan rising high into the wind. Their lord, a stern figure seated upon a horse, gave orders with a voice that cut through the silence like steel. Sam didn't know the words, but the body he wore remembered. He bowed low with the others, his forehead nearly to the ground, pretending he belonged. When the march ended, he was taken through the wooden gates of a great castle. High walls, tiled roofs, the smell of incense and cooked rice drifting in the air. His new name passed through the lips of the guards Kaoru, a samurai sworn to Lord Takeda. Sam repeated it in his mind. Kaoru. Another mask. Another borrowed life. Inside the castle courtyard he saw her. She walked slowly, attendants at her side, her kimono flowing like water with each step. Her hair was pinned with gold, her eyes lowered in the way noblewomen carried themselves. But when she lifted her gaze, even just for an instant, he froze. It was her, Emma. Not Emma in the way he knew her, but Emma all the same, hidden in the body of another time, another face, another destiny. His heart pounded so loudly, he thought others might hear it. He wanted to call her name, but his lips wouldn't move. He had learned. If he reached too soon, if he pushed against fate too fast, it would only tear her away from him. He lowered his eyes, just as a samurai should, but inside he burned. Later that night, in the barracks where the men sharpened their swords by candlelight, Sam listened to whispers. The lady's name was Hana Takeda, daughter of the Lord. Soon she would be married off to the son of a rival clan, the Kuroda, to secure peace. Her future was sealed, her fate tied to politics, not to love. Sam lay awake, staring at the wooden beams above him. He had seen her again. He had found her again. But once more, the world had built walls around her, and he knew what it meant. To reach her, he would have to risk everything. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of shamisen strings, and cherry blossoms drifted in the moonlight. Somewhere in the castle, Hana Takeda slept, unaware that her protector, her shadow in the night, was the same soul who had crossed deserts, empires, and jungles just to find her again. The days passed under the strict discipline of the castle, but Sam's eyes always drifted toward Hana Takeda. In the mornings, she walked across the garden, her attendants carrying lanterns or scrolls, her face calm and distant like the moon. At night, he heard the whispers of the other samurai. Her marriage to the Kuroda heir would seal the peace between clans. To them, she was not a woman. She was a bridge, a symbol, a tool for power. But to Sam, she was Emma. Always Emma. One night the moon was high and the corridors were silent. Sam walked the outer garden, pretending to patrol. The sound of water guided him to the koi pond, where lanterns floated like tiny stars. And there, alone beneath the blossoms, she stood. Hana Takeda. She raised her eyes, and for the first time, there was no wall of attendance, no veil of duty. Only her, fragile and human. Their gazes locked. Something passed between them. Something older than this world. Older than the clans and the swords that bound them. She did not speak, but her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, as if she too had been waiting. Sam bowed slightly, more out of instinct than custom. She tilted her head, studying him, and in that silence he knew she felt it. The pull, the echo of lifetimes past. In the nights that followed, they found each other again. Under the cherry trees where petals drifted like snow. Along the hidden paths by the river where fireflies lit the air. Words were few, gestures more. She would sit beside him and trace shapes in the dirt, while he listened to the rustle of her breath, the tremble in her hands when they almost touched. He longed to tell her the truth, to say her real name, but he held it back. If fate had put her here, in this body, in this age, then he would take her as she was. But destiny is never kind. One evening, as they met beneath the trees, Hana's voice broke the silence. She spoke in her language, slowly, carefully, as though choosing words she had never dared before. He didn't understand them fully, but he felt their meaning. I do not want this marriage. His chest tightened. She turned her face, shame flickering in her eyes. I belong to my clan, she whispered. He shook his head, stepping closer, heart pounding. No, you belong to yourself. She couldn't hear the words, but she understood the fire in his eyes, the way his hand trembled when he reached for hers. And this time, she didn't pull away. Their fingers touched, then clasped, and for a moment the world around them disappeared. But the world always returns. The following day, rumors spread in the barracks. Guards had seen shadows where there should have been none. A samurai lingering too close to the ladies' chambers. Whispers of dishonor, whispers of betrayal. Sam felt the eyes of his comrades on him, suspicion heavy in the air. He knew what would come. That night, Hana stood by the water, tears in her eyes. If they find us, you will die, she said, her voice shaking. He stepped close, resting his forehead against hers. If I must die, he whispered, then let it be for this. She didn't understand the words, but she understood him. And in the quiet of that night, they let the truth of their hearts speak louder than fear. But in the castle walls, footsteps echoed. The storm was coming. The dawn came heavy with silence. The castle courtyards were strangely still, the air thick with the weight of things unsaid. Sam rose from his mat, his sword already in his hand. Though no order had been given, something inside him knew. The whispers had turned into certainty. Their secret was no longer hidden. By the time he stepped into the garden, armored men were waiting. Their eyes were hard, their hands on the hilts of their blades. At their front stood the heir of the Kuroda clan, the man Hana was meant to marry. His armor gleamed, his expression carved in pride and fury. You dishonor both clans, he declared, his voice sharp as steel. Sam said nothing. What words could bridge lifetimes? What words could make them understand that she was not just a woman to him, not just a noble lady? She was the thread that bound his soul across time. All he could do was draw his blade, the steel whispering as it left its scabbard. The duel began. The clash of steel rang out in the courtyard, echoing against stone walls. Sam fought with the strength of desperation, every strike not for honor but for her. He moved swiftly, instinct guiding his arms, blocking, cutting, pressing forward. But the Kuroda heir was trained for this, his skill sharp, his rage burning. Around them, petals of cherry blossoms fell like snow, scattering on their blades, their armor, their blood. Sam's breath grew heavier, his muscles screaming. One mistake was all it took. The heir's blade cut deep into his side, a burning shock that stole his strength. He staggered, dropping to one knee, blood soaking into the ground. The warriors around them murmured, but none stepped forward. It was fate. It was the code. Then Hannah broke through. She ran past the guards, her kimono trailing in the dirt, her eyes wide with terror. "Stop!" she cried, her voice shattering the silence. She fell to her knees beside Sam, her hands pressing against his wound, her tears falling onto his face. "Please, please." Sam reached for her hand, his fingers trembling. He wanted to tell her everything about New York, about the desert, about the jungle, but all he managed was her true name. "Emma," he whispered. She froze, her heart pounding, her lips trembling. She didn't know why that name felt like hers, but it struck deep inside her soul. She held him tighter, shaking her head. "No, you can't leave me." His vision blurred, the world dimming around her face. He smiled faintly, weakly, his last breath breaking on his lips. "I always find you." And then the light came. Golden, blinding, pouring from his body. The petals rose into the air, caught in a wind that came from nowhere. The samurai stepped back in fear, their faces pale as the light swallowed him. Hannah screamed his name, clutching at him, but her arms found only emptiness. He was gone. The courtyard fell silent. Only Hannah's cries echoed against the castle walls, a broken melody of grief, as the cherry blossoms fell endlessly around her. And far away, in another place, another body, another age, Sam opened his eyes once more. For a long moment, there was nothing but silence. Then the sound of music, faint, familiar, crept back into the world. Sam opened his eyes and saw light dripping through a crystal chandelier. The same chandelier he had hit his head on, what felt like a lifetime ago. The same golden room, the same white flowers, the same wedding guests frozen mid-laughter. But this time, something inside him whispered that it wasn't real. He pushed himself up from the floor, his hands trembling. The chatter in the room resumed as if someone had pressed play on time. Emma was there, standing at the end of the aisle, radiant in her dress, the soft glow of candles reflecting in her eyes. For a second, he forgot how to breathe. "Sam?" she said, her voice breaking through the blur. "Are you okay?" He wanted to answer, but his heart pounded too loud. Images crashed through his mind like wave sandstorms in Arabia. The roar of the Colosseum, the endless green of the Amazon, the falling petals of cherry blossoms in Japan. Every face of Emma, every life, every death. He had carried her through centuries, through wars and chaos, through every life that time could give and take away. He whispered, almost to himself, "Emma." She smiled softly. "It's me. You hit your head, remember?" But he shook his head slowly. "No. I remember everything." She frowned, confusion in her eyes. The guests laughed again. The music swelled, but Sam barely heard it. The air itself felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. He looked around, the waiter pouring champagne in the corner, the children running near the tables, the flickering candles. Everything was looping, movements repeating. The waiter's hand moving in the same motion again and again. Sam blinked, realization burning behind his eyes. "This isn't real," he murmured. Emma stepped closer, concern in her voice. "Sam, What are you talking about? He turned toward her, his voice trembling. Do you ever feel like we've lived this before?
Not just here, somewhere else. A desert, a jungle.
A battlefield. Her expression softened, confusion fading into something deeper, something almost like recognition. You're scaring me, she whispered. He took a shaky breath.
Every time I lost you, I woke up somewhere else. Every time I died, I found you again.
But it's always the same ending, isn't it? Emma's lips parted. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, quietly, almost to herself, I dream about it sometimes. The trees, the ocean. Your face. The chandelier flickered. The music slowed, voices stretching unnaturally. Around them, the guests began to blur, their outlines fading into smoke. Emma turned in shock. Sam, what's happening? He stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached for her face. I think we're still inside it. Inside time. And this, he gestured around them, to the frozen air, the silent world, is the end. A tear slid down her cheek. Then what do we do? He smiled sadly. We finished the story. The room around them began to unravel. The chandeliers dimmed, the flowers wilted, the laughter dissolved into echoes. Sam and Emma stood alone, surrounded by shadows of what once was. He looked at her, memorizing every detail, her eyes, her trembling lips, the way she held onto his hand like it was the only real thing left. I don't know if this is life or death, he said softly, but I know it's ours. She leaned against his chest, her heartbeat steady against his. Then let's stay, she whispered. Sam closed his eyes. For a moment, the world was still. Then a soft wind moved through the room, carrying with it the faintest whisper of all the lives they had lived. And somewhere in the distance, a clock began to tick again. The city outside was silent. No cars, no wind, no sound. The streets of New York stretched endlessly beneath a sky without stars. Sam and Emma walked hand in hand, their footsteps echoing softly on the wet pavement. Neon lights flickered like dying fireflies, and yet there was no hum of life. It was as if the world had paused just for them. Emma's fingers tightened around his. Where is everyone? Sam looked around. The stores, the cars, the lights that refused to move. He understood now. We're not really back, he said quietly. This is what's left. The space between. The space between what? She asked. He hesitated, his voice trembling. Between the last heartbeat and forever. They stopped at a crosswalk. The red light blinked, but never turned green. Sam turned to her. I think we've been running through time because I couldn't let go. Every time I died, I fought it. Every time I lost you, I tried to find you again. But time wasn't the enemy, it was giving me chances to understand. Emma looked up at him, her voice shaking. Understand what? He smiled faintly. That love isn't about holding on. It's about finding each other, even when everything else disappears. Her eyes glistened. She reached up, her hand brushing his cheek. Then maybe we finally did. They stood in the middle of the empty street. Around them, snow began to fall. Or maybe it was ash, or maybe it was time itself, dissolving into light. Sam pulled her close, their foreheads touching. The city lights blurred into gold. I remember all of it, she whispered. The jungle, the war, the blossoms. And I remember how every time ended, he said softly. But this one doesn't have to. The ground beneath them began to glow, lines of golden light spreading out like veins of memory. The wind picked up, carrying echoes of their past lives. Laughter in the desert, battle cries in Rome, songs from the Amazon, the sound of rain on samurai armor. Emma looked around, awed. It's all us, Sam nodded. All the worlds we made. All the lives we lived. The light grew brighter. Time itself seemed to breathe around them, pulsing with warmth. Sam held her tighter. If we go now, he whispered, we go together. She smiled through tears. Always. He kissed her, not like before, not in fear or desperation, but with peace. And as they did,
The world dissolved. The city, the lights, even the air turned into shimmering dust. Their bodies faded, their outlines merging into one brilliant shape of light, swirling with gold and blue. In that moment there was no time. No past. No future. Only them. The light expanded, reaching across the skyline, across the sky until everything was white. Then silence. A long pause. And slowly, the sound of a clock ticking. Somewhere far away, in a quiet New York apartment, a photo sat on a shelf, a collage of faces across centuries. In each one, the same two souls smiled at each other, as if they'd known all along that love would always find a way. A faint voice, Sam's, whispered in the distance, "Maybe time was never our prison. Maybe it was our story." Fade to black.